Hello and welcome. I'm the Rambling Director. Today we're going to talk about one of the most underrated Christian films ever made. Now, I've long railed against the fact that the majority of Christian stories that we are getting in cinematic form come from pure flicks. And yeah, like most people, like most Christians for that matter, I don't find the majority of them that good. It's a shame because as a Christian myself, I feel Christians should be representing Christ and should be representing our faith as the best humanity has to offer, not preaching nonsense to the choir. Amazing Grace is a 2006 film by Michael Apted, written by Stephen Knight, and has an all-star cast of some great names, some of which were not big names at the time. For instance, Benedict Cumberbatch won Best Breakthrough British Actor for this film at a time when he was basically an unknown in terms of film anyway. It stars Johann Griffold, who you probably know as Mr. Fantastic, or the officer in the Titanic movie who says, "Come about!" He's quite an underrated name, all things considered. There's also some big names like Rufus Sewell, Albert Finney, and of course, Michael Did You Put Your Name in the Goblet of Fire Gambon. This is the story of a Parliament member named William Wilberforce, who at least some of you will have heard of. The film starts off with a workhorse being beaten until it can't stand. William Wilberforce, who's passing by in a carriage, stops the men, literally saving the horse's life from being beaten to death. This is a great little metaphor, first off, for exactly what William Wilberforce would go on to dedicate his life to doing. Wilberforce himself was a big proponent of animal rights, and going on to be a big hand in stopping the slave trade, almost single-handedly leading the movement in Parliament. He was quite literally trying to stop innocent people from being beaten down until effectively they were wiped off the face of the earth. This is also one of those moments that you could learn a lot from screenwriting. There's an old saying that if you want your hero to be really sympathetic right from the get-go, you have them save a cat right at the beginning of your story. Well, in this case, William saves a horse. Since a horse is like, 18 times bigger than a cat, surely you must have 18 times the sympathy for him, right? William Wilberforce, who is by most of his friends called Wilbur, is not well, and he often isn't. He suffers from a lifelong ailment, which we get more into later. But right off the bat, you can see that he is not very well. He is a sick, sick man. He's going to the country to have a holiday with his cousin, Henry Thornton, but his dreams are tormented by the four voters who went to the opera instead of voting for his last bill, literally causing him to lose the vote to abolish slavery. Henry and his wife try to set Wilbur up with a woman they believe would be a good match for him. Her name is Barbara. And this is a fairly unique meet-cute for a romantic lead.
I'll never forgive him.
I'll never forgive her. However, I admire your tireless efforts to force our ridiculous parliament to abolish the slave trade.
Well, if you had, I would have changed the subject and talked about botany.
Well, I would have been bored by botany.
So, even in other circumstances, it would have been a disaster.
The majority of the story is told by Wilbur to his future wife, and we get a sense of how the two's relationship grows and how much he really needs her. The story flashes back 15 years, and we see Wilbur at the height of his political game. And hey look, a young Benjamin Cucumber. We get an amazing scene where the men play poker, and one of the men uses a slave as a way to raise the bet. Now, Cucumber Patch attempts to align with Wilbur after this, but Wilbur goes back in to interrupt the barroom singing and sings the song Amazing Grace. Here we get a sense of Wilbur's lovely singing voice, which he is kind of known for. He also gives the background for the song Amazing Grace.
It was written by my old preacher. He was captain of a slave ship for 20 years. He repented his sins, and then he wrote this song. Amazing grace, but now I see.
I love how Wilbur views his relationship with God in this little scene. It's almost like a hidden romance. He doesn't want anybody to know about it.
Dear God, I know this is utterly absurd, but I feel I have to meet you in secret.
Wilbur has rediscovered his faith in God, and he's considering leaving Parliament and leaving politics altogether to pursue a life lived solely for the Lord. We also get lots of little bits and bobs here and there showing us how Wilbur is extremely generous. He takes Christ's lesson about the sheep and the goats to heart, feeding poor beggars who come to his house, giving charity to people that he feels are underprivileged, and yes, allowing random animals to just move into his house. Now, Duke Cucumber, or, well, I should probably stop calling him by his real character's name. Benedict Cumberbatch plays William Pitt, so I will be calling him William Pitt from now on. I just can't resist making fun of that name. It's just a great name. So William Pitt helps convince William that he should not leave politics and go into the church, but rather he could do God's work by joining the abolition movement. This leads to a dinner scene which is entirely dialogue-driven and yet strangely cinematic. It's a uniquely moving little piece of cinema.
We hear that you are a man who doesn't believe what he hears until he sees it.
These are for the legs, neck. When the slaves leave port in Africa, they're locked into a space 4 foot by 18 inches.
The chains are not unlocked until you reach the plantations and do this, to let you know that you no longer belong to God, but to a man.
You're having problems choosing whether to do the work of God or the work of a political activist.
We humbly suggest that you can do both.
Pitt, who is at the very least not as dedicated of a Christian, if not just not a Christian at all, is trying to convince Wilbur, and he says this great line about Christianity that I've just always loved.
Surely the principles of Christianity lead to action as well as meditation.
He returns to his old church to see his old mentor, John Newton, the man who wrote Amazing Grace, who lives with the guilt of his former life as a slave owner and tells Wilbur to do it, take them on and end slavery.
You told me that you live in the company of 20,000 ghosts.
I was explaining to a child why a grown man cowers in a dark corner. All I know is 20,000 slaves live with me in this little church. There's still blood on my hands. Take them on. Blow their dirty, filthy ships out of the water. But do it. For God's sake.
With this encouragement, Wilbur decides to go for it. Then we see a beautifully rendered montage of slaves making sugar, which awakens Wilbur back at the current time 15 years later. Barbara comes over for dinner. This is once again an attempt to get the two of them together. And Barbara and Wilbur have some cute little exchanges.
Mr. Wilberforce, I understand you have an interest in botany.
Whatever gives you the idea that I might be interested in something as tedious as botany? Sorry. It's a private joke.
This is followed by them being sent out in the garden to basically to get to know each other. And they decide they're going to have a fake argument so that people will stop trying to get them together. This is a really great little moment of chemistry between them as they realize that they actually don't disagree on anything.
I agreed with every word you said on the Dale's factory debate.
You read every word?
No.
Neither did I.
Barbara encourages Wilbur to take back up the mantle and fight to end slavery yet again. They then talk about Equiano, a former slave who was a good friend of Wilbur's who had by this point died. Equiano had taken Wilbur to see a real slave ship for the first time. And following this, Wilbur introduces the bill to end slavery. It doesn't go well.
Many of my honorable friends in this house have interests in the Indies, and I believe them to be men of humanity. It's going to be bright with you. There is no one among them who's...
The abolitionists meet together afterward, and I love how they address the pragmatic issues of slavery. It's not as simple as just end the slave trade right now and see what happens. There are things that need to be taken into account. Now, they make it clear the repercussions are worth it, and as they should, but I just think it's nice that they do address them. This is different than, for instance, the film Lincoln by Steven Spielberg, where they never really address or take seriously the concerns of ending slavery. It really is an argument that even the abolitionists have to contend with. Now, Lord Fox, comes in, and he's always opposed Wilbur. The two of them were enemies in Parliament. But now that Wilbur is standing up against slavery, Lord Fox has decided, actually, no, I agree with you, and I'm going to be on your side for this. Now, there's a little moment, it's not too long, but it's just a great little moment, where Wilbur tricks people into kind of a thank you dinner on a ship touring the bay, and he uses this as an excuse to force them to see the inhumanity of a slave ship and to smell the disgusting odor that is pouring off of it, the smell of death. We get a great montage of some of the efforts that the abolitionists are making to change the hearts and minds of the public. This montage is narrated by Wilbur in the present. And Barbara and Wilbur's romance really begins to blossom as Wilbur confesses to her his feelings of failure. We flash back again to the day Wilbur presented his petition. They had collected, across the entirety of England, 390,000 signatures petitioning to end slavery. And then they had this great little moment of drama to kind of punctuate that petition.
Dry, calm way, my honorable friends.
That's right. Lord Fox publicly adds his name to the list and switches sides. Good gracious, I love that moment. Now, what's wild is this is about the midpoint of the movie, and you would think that this petition would be like the climax. But no, if you know William Wilberforce's story, you know there's a lot more to go. Lord Fox realizes that the Home Secretary may stand in the way of the bill, and he even asks Pitt, now he's Prime Minister, to get him out of the way. And there's a great little moment of tension between Pitt and the Home Secretary as Pitt confronts him about his treachery when he is about to basically take a bribe in order to make sure that the abolition movement does not go anywhere.
Don't force me to put a pistol to your head.
Well, if you do, there will be 2 pistols. And perhaps if I duck, you'll shoot each other.
We also hear more excuses in the House, and now the arguments that seemed pragmatic to begin with are starting to really become what they really are, excuses. Clarkson, who is a longtime member of the abolitionist movement, played by Rufus Sewell, has a little fight with Wilbur over the revolution in France. And basically, Clarkson is saying struggle for financial freedom and the general unfairness of the civilized war is guaranteeing more revolution to come. This introduces the idea that their movement could be seen as seditious, and in fact, the next scene shows that that is exactly what is going to happen. Wilbur tells Clarkson never to speak about revolution to him ever again because he will remain loyal to the king. And I like how you can tell why Wilbur is doing this. It's not because Wilbur doesn't care about all the unfairness that Clarkson is mentioning. It's that Wilbur knows that he can't fog his thinking by aiming too broadly. God gave him a mission to take care of the slave trade, and that has to be his primary focus first. Fixing the world can come later. Wilbur hurts himself while chopping firewood, and the doctor starts to give him opium to deal with the pain, which will later become an addiction. Pitt and Wilbur argue about the oncoming war, and we see their friendship stretched to the breaking point as their loyalties finally cross each other.
When war comes, opposition will soon be called sedition.
By who? By you?
Over the years, Wilbur is branded as seditious, a traitor, and his bills are easily defeated. It's here we see his voice starts to fail from all the shouting, which is why at one point Wilbur laments that the worst part about his sickness is that he doesn't have his beautiful singing voice anymore. He's lost the ability to sing. We get back to the present. The war is now over. Wilbur has told the story to Barbara throughout the night, and now the dawn is breaking. With Barbara by his side, Wilbur decides it's time to return to the Parliament. But first, Wilbur and Barbara are married.
Also, Barbara and I have discovered that we're both impatient and prone to rash decisions. But she wants to tell you about it herself.
During the wedding, Barbara requests the song Amazing Grace, and as they start singing together as a couple, Wilbur finds his singing voice again.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound was lost, but now am found.
Wilbur is suddenly a new man. He even brings his animals to live at their new home. Prime Minister Pitt comes to meet the new bride, and the two men reconcile.
I never changed. I don't change.
Well, hurrah for you. The mood may even be swinging back in your favor. As your Prime Minister, I urge caution.
And as my friend?
Not to hell with caution.
And Wilbur comes once again to see Newton, who is now completely blind. We find that Newton, after years of bottling up his confession about what he did, has finally begun to write his account down and begs Wilbur to use his account of slavery to help stir the public up and eventually abolish the slave trade altogether. And we see the abolitionists are now coming up with a new strategy.
I've had an idea. In my law books, I think I might have stumbled across something. Loosely translated, it means we cheat.
See, all the new evidence of the cruelty of the slave trade and all the new material they've gathered is simply not going to be enough, not with so many hard-headed parliamentarians. Now, when you hear the strategy explained between Pitt, Clarkson, and Wilbur, it's actually a really fantastic strategy. Basically, what they're doing is cutting the heels out from under the slave trade without ever abolishing slavery itself.
So our slave ships will be just as liable to seizure as French ones. Without the protection of neutral flags, 80% of the British slave trade will be finished overnight.
Lord Tarleton, who has been one of the chief oppositions to abolition, realizes what's happening as the vote is going through the House. But the president of the House refuses to grant adjournment. He goes out to try to collect as many people to vote against abolition as possible.
What the hell is everyone? Everybody's at the races in Epsom. They were given free tickets. I saved one for you. A free gift from William Wilberforce.
After knowing the pain that this very trick had caused Wilbur in the past, this is such a great moment of catharsis. We get a wonderfully acted scene where Wilbur has withdrawals from giving up the opium. Now, we were told that this cutting the heels out from under the slave trade would take about 2 years to put slavery completely out of business. So we flash forward 2 years. Wilbur now has a son, and Pitt is on the verge of death. And as the two men have one last conversation, we see that even at the end, Pitt's main concern is ending the slave trade. We also see visual symbols of Wilberforce's faith strengthening. At the beginning, he said that he was always in awe of the intricacy of the spider's web. Well, now we see that all returning to him. In other words, as he's on the brink of fulfilling the mission God gave him, finally, he feels a sense of pride that he has not failed at his mission. And all the wonder and spark for life that he once had has fully come back to him. John Newton comes to watch as Wilbur once again submits his bill. Tension is high as the bill is read out and the votes are taken.
Ayes to the right, 283.
I love how understated Wilbur's victory is. It's very mild compared to, for instance, when the 13th Amendment is passed in the movie Lincoln. Here, there's almost a solemnity to it, that although everybody else is celebrating, Wilbur is almost just more relieved than anything else.
When people speak of great men, they think of men like Napoleon. And yet his dreams will be haunted by the oppressions of war. William Wilberforce, however, will return to his family, lay his head on his pillow. And remember, the slave trade is no more.
We may occasionally get little independent movies with a recognizable name like Padre Pio or The Shack. However, this is a movie specifically about a real-life Protestant saint. It was made with a budget. It has a beautifully written script, an all-star cast, It's directed well, and the effects hold up really well. The man who has a calling from God is not a madman or a serial killer the way religious people are always represented in movies today. He's a real man whose faith is important to him. And unlike modern biopics, where a person's faith has to be sidelined or made secondary because we've completely bought into the myth that religion is evil, and if anything, it was a hindrance to the person accomplishing something. No. Wilberforce is acknowledged for what he is. His faith is acknowledged for what it was. The spark that brought down an evil that has plagued the world since humans first realized that the strong could reign over the weak. My church, the Anglican Church, recognizes Wilberforce as a saint. I believe as the Catholic Church becomes more ecumenical and starts embracing, for instance, Eastern Orthodox saints, I'd be surprised if Wilberforce wasn't acknowledged as a saint by them too. He's a great man who deserves to be memorialized and remembered, and this is a great movie to show you what a great man he was. Thank you everybody for watching. God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.